Shalom, and welcome back to Bnei Noach Academy, Thoughts on the Torah. Please remember to hit the like button, to subscribe, and most importantly, to share this insight and inspiration with friends and family. So when you look in Deuteronomy Chapter 14, it primarily discusses the rules of kosher versus non-kosher food. Now, by the way, what does the word kosher mean? Kosher means fit, meaning the food that's fit for consumption. Now, I do have to make the following disclaimer, if I may. I just want to be sure that these rules, meaning these specific rules of which foods, which meats are allowed or not allowed, are really exclusively only for Jews. In other words, a non-Jew is not obliged, is not bound by these rules in detail in particular. However, the general idea of it is what I want to focus in on. In other words, what is really the general meaning of all this? In plain, simple English, why is God mixing into what I eat and what I don't eat? I mean, there's one thing if God tells us how to worship him. God tells us about, the lofty spiritual, so to speak, observances. But food, I mean, does it really make a difference what I eat? God, does it really matter to you if I eat this or I eat that? And like I said, by extension, this applies to all mankind. It tells us that God says, yes, I want to stick, so to speak, my proverbial nose into your business to know what you're eating, to make sure that you're eating the right thing or that you're eating in the right manner. Why is this so important? The answer is you are what you eat. And you are the way you eat. In other words, although we cannot exist without eating, God made it that the fuel that keeps our body and soul together is food. And the fact is that, God forbid, when there is no food available, when there is a famine, people die, and in a very, very difficult and suffering manner, because you can't live without food. At the same time, you can't live without food. The food not only just keeps us alive by default, but the food, what we eat, how we eat it, the manner in which we eat it, in other words, our attitude towards food actually gets to define our lives. It actually sets the tone for our lives. In other words, not only does it keep us alive by default, like putting fuel into a car, it doesn't really predict how well the car will drive and everything else that happens in the car. Although to a certain extent it could, depending on the grade of fuel you put in. But at the end of the day, a lot depends on the driver. A lot depends on the various technologies that have been inserted into that vehicle. But in the body, the fuel that keeps the body alive, that keeps the body going, also dictates, also will impact, that is, how that person, that body and soul will live, how they will behave. And that's why when people eat in a very coarse manner, when people eat coarse types of foods, people eat foods that aren't really consistent with refinement, they tend, unfortunately, to be coarse, to behave coarsely, and to behave in a manner which is more animal-like versus human-like. So to conclude, although the laws of kashrut, which means the laws of kosher food, is into the category of mitzvot, of commandments, which we, quote, do not know the reason for. In other words, they defy human logic. This is super and above and beyond what the human mind can comprehend. They are in the category of mitzvot, which are considered to be chukim, which means statutes. Yet, there are elements of it which we could understand. A great, great commentator and one of the great Jewish thinkers of all time, the Ramban, that's an acronym for Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, known as Nachmanides, he actually explains how, although we ultimately do not know the reason for why certain birds are, for example, kosher and certain are not, but he says when you look closely and you pay attention, you will notice that there is kind of a line that goes down the middle. Those birds that are permitted for kosher consumption, meaning for a Jew to eat, are typically birds that are not birds of prey. All birds of prey happen to be in the category of those birds which are forbidden. The point, he says, is that you can see that there's an inherent quality in the food that we eat, and God doesn't want us to, so to speak, adopt and internalize, that is, those traits which are not befitting a good human being, a servant of God. So in short, I am not suggesting that anybody has to start eating kosher from here on, especially if you're not Jewish. However, I do strongly encourage you, watch what you eat. Think about your food. Do you live to eat? You know, people say, I'm a foodie, I'm into food. Or do you eat to live? And if you eat to live, then the quality of the food and how you eat that food is going to definitely impact your life, which ultimately your life is for a purpose.